Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new Pokemon TCG video. Today we have a very special video. I'm actually doing a PTCGO mini series with another YouTuber. You guys may have heard of him before. His name is a blue golf ball. So I think you guys are really gonna enjoy the videos that we have for you guys. And essentially we had a bit of a challenge deck to make today. The deck that we had to make was a budget deck. I'm sure most of you guys know what that means. So what that means is that we essentially set a budget and then we were not allowed to spend more than the allotted budget. Now before we start, I do want to say that I was a little bit terrible with my budget. I mean, I ultimately came up with a total price of, I believe, $79.74. The exact details will be in the description section down below. We based our pricing off the TrollandToad, I believe the website was called TrollandToad website, and you guys could actually afford my deck for quite a bit cheaper than what I built it for. I mean, I wasn't exactly all that conservative in terms of my spending, so if I could do it again, I'm sure you guys would be able to save at least a couple of extra dollars. Now, of course, with a budget deck, with a budget limit of $80, that really limits what we are able to buy. So for example, Shaman EX is an extremely expensive card, so that would absolutely blow a roof through our budget, and that is not something we want to do. So the main Pokemon that I decided to stick with, guys, was the florges-ex. Reason being is that as far as EX Pokemons go, this is a very inexpensive and affordable EX Pokemon, and also a pretty powerful one, I would say, especially with the Skyfield Stadium card. So the florges-ex, I believe, cost me $2.89. Again, the exact details are in the description down below. So florges-ex didn't set me back a whole lot, and it's a pretty powerful Pokemon as well. So I decided that this was going to be the main attacker of my deck. By far the most expensive card I believe that I had in my deck was the dowsing machine. It cost, I believe, around $8 to $9, something like that. So that's pretty expensive, but I felt like it was very worthwhile, just because this A-Spec card goes a long way in our deck, especially since we'd like to be able to come out victorious in those stadium wars. Again, that Skyfield Stadium card being so important, so I decided to run this as our A-Spec card. I also have to say that I was very surprised by how expensive the VS Seeker card was. I mean, they cost $5.89 each or something like that. I think I could have gotten a little bit cheaper. Again, I have put the exact prices down below, so you guys should feel free to check those out. I do also want to say, guys, that all the cards that I'm using are actually the full art and super rare versions. Absolutely, when you're building a budget deck, you want to steer away from those very expensive cards. So when I do put the exact pricings, I'm not actually referring to the super rare or the full art version. So just keep that in mind before you guys start a witch hunt accusing me of lying or anything like that. And the prices may be a little bit outdated. I'm not sure how often TrollandToad updates their pricing, so at least when I had looked, the prices were approximately what I have noted down. So anyways, discussing the deck, guys, another Pokemon that we have in our deck is going to be the xerneas with the Geomancy attack. This will allow us to speed up the rate of energy attachments to the florges-ex's by a little bit, but its main inclusion in the deck, because florges-ex is already pretty energetically efficient, only needs 2 fairy energies to get going. So again, its main inclusion in the deck was for the fact that its Rainbow Spear attack could help us take care of any safeguard Pokemon that we may encounter. So that's why I decided to include it. So we are running 3 copies of him in our deck. We're also running a total of 3 copies of the exeggcute. I really like the propagation ability, especially since we have the Skyfield Stadium card. Whenever it gets discarded, we can go and dump our exeggcutes into the discard pile. If we're able to bring out the Skyfield Stadium card, then we can go right ahead and retrieve them from the discard pile and then lay them back down into play. So exeggcute does go a long way with respects to this deck's success, so I decided to include 3 in our deck. And the very last Pokemon in our deck, guys, is mainly the slurpuff with the Sweet Veil ability. So this was just in case my opponent decides to run any sorts of cards that inflict some sort of special condition on us, such as, of course, the hypnotoxic lasers. Slurpuff would be able to counter that. So that's why I decided to include 2 copies of the slurpuff in our deck. Now, discussing some of the other cards in our deck, guys, most of them are actually pretty self-explanatory, so I'm only going to be briefly discussing a couple of them. So we are running a total of 3 copies of the Battle Compressor. has a bit of a dual purpose. Its main one, of course, is to get those executes into the discard pile, so that whenever we make use of cards such as the Ultra Ball or anything that forces us to discard cards, we can of course get rid of the executes, and of course we can make use of their propagation ability to bring them out from the discard pile, lay them into play, and then give the florges-ex a bit of a damage boost. So that's one of the purposes of the battle compressor. The other one is that we can use it to trim our deck of cards that we won't need later on in the game. Now, the card that I'm most specifically referring to is the Pokemon Fan Club. This is usually a very how should I say it, futile card, I guess, to include in the deck late into the game. Really what we needed is for early in the game, when we'd like to bring out our florges-ex's, any other Pokemon, for us to really be able to make use of the florges-ex's attack. So afterwards we can just go right ahead and battle compress them into the discard pile. So Pokemon Fan Club does go a long way with respects to allowing us to set up our deck, but after that it's more or less useless, I would say, to a large extent. Some other cards that we are running in our deck, guys, I briefly mentioned the Skyfield Stadium card. This is of course where the bulk of the power of our florges-ex is going to come from. We can essentially load up our bench with up to 8 Pokemon, and of course that florges-ex as well, so we can theoretically hit for up to 180 damage if we have a fully loaded bench. A muscle band as well on the florges-ex will allow us to hit a total of 200 damage in a single attack, so that is pretty impressive. We are running 4 copies of the Skyfield Stadium card. Now, I feel like we've discussed most of the cards that I felt were really interesting, so I'm going to briefly be discussing some of the other cards remaining in our deck. So we are running a single copy of the Startling Megaphone. Mainly this is to allow us to deal with Garbodor. 2 copies of the Switch card, of course, to allow us to switch in between our Pokemon. Since we are not running the Fairy Garden, we are running the Skyfield Stadium card. We are running a total of 3 copies of the Ultra Ball to allow us to grab the Pokemon that we need. 2 VS Seekers. Honestly, I wanted to include 3 VS Seekers, but it was just way too expensive, so that's why we are sticking with 2. Again, this is a budget deck. We are running a total of 2 copies of the Colress, 4 copies of the N, and 4 copies of the Juniper for some draw support. 2 Lysandres to lure out some of our opponent's bench Pokemon. Again, Lysandre was a relatively expensive card as well. 2 Muscle Bands to increase the total damage output of our Pokemon, and a total of 12 Fairy Energy cards. Now, if you guys would like to take a look at a Blue Golf Balls deck list, the link will be provided in the description section down below. And since we are going to be showcasing a battle as well, which I think you guys are really going to enjoy, I've actually separated the deck list and the video where we are actually fighting, so the links to the videos will be provided in the description section down below as well, so you guys should make sure to check that out. And I think that is going to be it, so I'm going to see you guys very shortly. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you guys in just